Okay, let's just dive right into this, literally and figuratively. Imagine stepping outside tomorrow morning, coffee in hand, ready to start your day, only to learn an absolutely impossible truth. The Earth has zero ocean left. I mean, not just a severe drought somewhere, but every single sea is just gone. The entire planet completely drained overnight. It's a terrifying, totally mind-bending scenario. And in this explainer, we're going to explore exactly what that world would look like. And honestly, how fast everything we know would completely unravel.
So, what actually happens that first morning? Well, the very first thing you'd notice isn't actually silence. It would be the terrifying absence of a sound you probably didn't even realize was holding the planet together. No rolling waves, no distant roar of the tide breathing against the shore. We're so incredibly used to the rhythm of the ocean, right? It's almost like a second sky beneath our feet. Without it, the planet would immediately feel like it just lost its heartbeat. The silence of a completely dead coastline would be absolutely deafening.
And the immediate visual shock? Staggering. We're so used to this living, breathing planet defined by interconnected blue waters. You know, that classic pale blue dot. But overnight, billions of people would transition from assuming, okay, this has got to be some global hoax or a satellite glitch, to realizing the horrifying truth. The continental shelves are just stretched out, bare and broken. The great currents? Gone. The world is suddenly this wounded, brown, dusty place, with exposed seabeds that honestly resemble the skeleton of some ancient giant beast.
You know, the psychological impact would really hit us first. To lose the ocean wouldn't just feel like losing a resource. It would feel like losing a relative older than civilization itself. Humanity wouldn't just feel fear. We'd be feeling this profound, heavy grief. We love the ocean because it represents deep time, mystery, and beauty. It's literally where life began, and it's baked right into our collective DNA. To just wake up and find it gone, it would trigger a period of global mourning unlike anything in human history.
But, as you can probably guess, that grief would quickly give way to sheer, practical panic. The ocean was the hidden highway of civilization, and overnight, poof, that highway vanishes. Coastal cities immediately change shape. Bustling ports filled with cranes and cargo containers, they instantly become these dead industrial shells just sitting on the edge of massive cliffs. Fishing fleets collapse right into the mud. This throws our entire global system of imports and exports into complete chaos. The things we take for absolutely granted, next-day delivery, fresh produce, cheap electronics, would halt immediately.
Looking at the sheer scale of this, the world economy wouldn't just slow down, it would completely convulse. Massive oil transport ships are suddenly stranded in literal miles of muck, requiring entirely new, impossible land infrastructure just to get the cargo back. Global grain shipping halts, which instantly triggers regional food shortages in countries that totally rely on maritime imports to survive. Millions of tons of consumer goods are just frozen in dead basins around the world. We'd be forced to frantically try and rebuild our entire logistics network around rail, air, and new land routes that, frankly, simply don't exist yet.
Now, the really crucial point here is that oceans aren't just big blue decorations on our map. They act as a massive thermal buffer. Essentially, they are a planet-sized thermostat. They absorb, store, and redistribute heat from the sun to stabilize our global temperatures. Without this massive buffer, the Earth loses its absolute greatest stabilizing system. Places that were once pleasantly temperate, brutally hot during the day, and freezing cold at night. Coastlines that historically moderated our climate would vanish, and we'd be facing incredibly violent wind systems. And as this domino effect continues, the entire water cycle just fails. The ocean is the great source of our planet's evaporation. Without it, clouds simply stop forming into the massive weather patterns we rely on, and rain cycles weaken globally. Forests struggle to survive, and landlocked lakes and rivers shrink rapidly. But the real killer here? Global agriculture failing. See, the ocean doesn't just feed fish. It feeds farms by providing the stable, predictable rainfall we desperately need for bread, rice, vegetables, livestock, everything. Hunger would become a planetary emergency in a matter of weeks.
We'd also face a biological disaster that is almost incomprehensible. I mean, we aren't just talking about wiping out sharks, whales, and dolphins, as tragic as that is. The invisible ecosystems like plankton and algae that support the entire marine food web and provide roughly half of the oxygen we breathe every single day, they just vanish. Mangroves, coral reefs, and kelp forests completely shatter under the dry sun. This vast living engine of evolution, this billions of years old chain of life, stops cold. The Earth becomes biologically thinner, far harsher, and way less resilient.
And then, of course, comes the ultimate mystery. Where did all the water actually go?
Did it absorb underground into massive subterranean caverns? Was it somehow extracted by a force way beyond our understanding? Boiled off into space? This impossible disappearance would spark endless global panic, existential dread, and, you guessed it, wild conspiracy theories. Scientists, seismologists, atmospheric researchers, they'd all be frantically pulling data, desperately searching for this missing mass of water. It would easily become the greatest and most terrifying puzzle in human history.
But while the scientists are frantically searching, what is left behind is now fully exposed. The drained abyss reveals incredible things humans have never seen in full scale. The ocean floor essentially becomes the largest archaeological and geological exhibition in history. Explorers would descend into deep tectonic scars, walking across massive trenches like astronauts exploring a new alien planet. We'd find thousands of hidden shipwrecks perfectly preserved, lost cargo scattered for miles, and, well, maybe even finally figure out where all those missing sunglasses went over the decades.
But hold on, the excitement of that archaeological dream would very quickly meet a much darker reality. This new exposed continent isn't exactly a stable national park you can just go hiking in. Actually, it's an extreme, highly fractured environment. Anyone trying to explore it would be dealing with poisonous sediments, explosive underground gas pockets, and massive toxic dust storms swirling up from dried seabed particles. Plus, the slopes of the continental shelves, highly unstable and prone to massive landslides. It would be a dangerous, hostile frontier that actively fights back against exploration.
Culturally speaking, the shock would be completely staggering. Just imagine vibrant cities like Los Angeles, Mumbai, or New York suddenly haunted by the sheer absence of their coastal identity. The breeze, the humidity, the smell of the salt just gone. Port cultures would suffer a massive identity crisis. Coastal communities would no longer be, well, coastal. Their language, local cuisine, economies, and collective memories would be utterly displaced. It would turn these once lively beach towns into quiet, haunted outposts, just looking out over landlocked, dusty basins.
In the wake of all this, tourism would actually undergo this bizarre, somber explosion. The missing ocean would become a kind of holy ruin. Millions of people would make these pilgrimages, traveling massive distances just to stand at the edge of the old cliffs and look down at the exposed trenches. People would gather to grieve at flat, blindingly white deserts of salt and sand, exactly where the waves used to break. Museums would pivot totally to display saltwater relics, bottled seawater, and old nautical maps as treasured memories of the vanished seas.
And this leads directly into the total collapse of maritime culture. Seafaring languages and myths, they become relics from a lost age, told in history books rather than out on the docks. Marine navigation, lighthouses, and ocean rescue simply cease to exist. Think about it. For thousands of years, the ocean connected, separated, and humbled civilizations. Without it, the great frontier of exploration vanishes entirely. The edge of our world gets replaced by endless, unforgiving salt flats. The Earth becomes physically connected, sure, but spiritually, it becomes much, much smaller.
Geopolitically, the map is essentially torn apart and thrown out the window. The old order, defined by carefully negotiated exclusive economic zones, powerful naval carrier groups, and clear island sovereignty, vanishes overnight. It's completely replaced by sheer political chaos. Maritime borders become absolutely meaningless now that they're just dry land. Naval powers lose their strategic pillars, leaving multi-billion-dollar fleets literally rusting in the sun. International laws built around the ocean as a shared global space totally collapse, and once isolated island nations suddenly find themselves stranded atop towering mountains in empty basins. Now, some might argue, hey, maybe there's a silver lining here. Sure, new land routes might eventually connect continents without the need for ships, and previously unreachable deep-sea minerals suddenly become highly accessible as our territory expands. But the reality of that trade-off, it's incredibly grim. The planet loses its climatic balance, turning weather into a literal deadly lottery. The biosphere slowly suffocates and degrades. Even if we gain these new land corridors and rich mineral deposits, they could absolutely never replace the blue engine of life we lost.
For future generations, the ocean would become nothing more than an inherited memory. A world once full of tides and currents would become, sadly, a world of echoes. Children born after the disappearance would have to ask their parents what waves actually sounded like, or why the moon once pulled the tides across the sand. Older people would struggle to explain that profound feeling of standing at the shore, just watching something so vast move without asking permission.
In response to this unimaginable loss, humanity would obsess over restoration.
a massive global scientific alliance would form, completely transcending old borders. Countries would drastically pool their resources and their brightest minds. The impossible mission to bring back the blue begins. Philosophers, engineers, hydrologists, and policymakers would unite in the greatest scientific project in history, perhaps trying to synthetically recreate massive water bodies. It honestly proves a profound point about us. We're often slow to protect what we have, but we become absolutely extraordinary when forced to try and save what we've lost.
Ultimately, this impossible scenario forces civilization to confront a pretty terrifying fact. Earth is not simply a stage for life. It is a delicate, deeply interconnected structure that life fundamentally depends on. We built our entire human future, our megacities, our politics, our daily routines, all on a planet whose greatest stabilizing force has completely vanished. With the planet stripped, the air much drier, and the skies altered, we would deeply realize exactly how much of our world was simply borrowed from the sea.
We become a fully landlocked species, staring out at empty places where waves used to rise, forced to ask a really difficult question. How did we let something so incredibly vast become invisible in our gratitude? It's a striking reminder to appreciate the delicate blue engine of our planet while it's still here, shaping our weather, feeding our populations, and giving us every second breath. So, if this idea pulled you in, I really want to hear from you. Comment below on what you think would happen first in this scenario, share this explainer with someone who loves deep what-if stories, and subscribe for more mind-bending scenarios. Until next time, keep exploring.